basically, and this really goes for all forms of violent extremism, but for white nationalists, you got 4 options once you're in this. You'll get killed, you'll go to prison, you'll get out, or you lead a long, bitter, loveless life where you're terrified of everyone on the planet Earth, every waking moment of your day. And of those 4 options, I find the last one the most distasteful. I'd rather be dead or in prison than to live a life like that. I say that because most of my peers from back in the day, which was 1987 and 1994, so this is decades ago, some of my peers did die, some are still in prison. Almost all the other ones have got out, and by get out I mean are no longer affiliated with any sort of hate group. Most of them have very much changed their lives around. Some of them haven't really changed the way that they look at the world a whole lot. But most of them have. And the ones who have, I'm definitely in touch with. The ones who have not, I'm still in touch with as well, and on fairly good terms, and I always let them know I'm available for them to talk to. The ones who stayed in are definitely an outlier, and they're probably number about the same as the ones who are dead or in prison. And I don't have a lot of contact with them. Once in a while, I'll see them on social media, and I'll send them a friend request, or I'll send them a message. And when I message them, I'm just like, hey, dude, I'm glad you're still around. If there's anything I can do for you, I'd love to catch up. Let me know. I just want to be friendly with them and let them know that I care about them.
So am I correct that it takes a lot of courage to make a decision to separate yourself from the network?
It does. It's difficult to do. And obviously the longer you're doing this, the more habituated you are to that way of thinking. And so I was in for 7 years. And after 7 years, I had to kind of teach myself all over again how to connect with the world, how to interact with people, but really how to know myself. And that's a difficult thing for anybody to do, but especially when you convince yourself that an ideology is your identity. And that's the case for white nationalists. It's the case for all violent extremists. And when you adopt an ideology as your identity, then anything that threatens that ideology also threatens you personally. And it's difficult. It does take courage. There's a lot of parallels between violent extremist ideology and addiction. I'd say this is not only a former white nationalist, but also an alcoholic. So I can see a lot of those parallels. So it takes a lot of courage for somebody to quit drinking. But at the same time, they're obligated to, because it's the right thing to do. So yeah.
I don't want to dominate the question here, but I just have one very quick question. One more.
Sure.
What made you decide to change?
That was my question.
That was okay. That's the most frequently asked question I get. The simple word is exhaustion. It's exhausting to live that way. And I don't say that to necessarily drum up sympathy for people who think like that. It's on them. I made a conscious decision to adopt that stuff. That wasn't foisted upon me. And even for kids who were brought up like that, you realize a part of your life where you're a human being and you think for yourself, and you're going to discover things for yourself, and that's a lot of the process of getting out, is to say rather than have my ideology and my relationship with the world force-fed to me or dictated to me, I'm going to find out these things myself. And a key to violent extremist ideologies is separatism. So whether you're talking about the so-called Islamic State, or you're talking about the National Socialist movement or whatever, they willfully want to cut you off from the rest of society, not just from other human beings in personal relationships, but from media, arts, and culture, which are going to expose you to the truth that humanity is a beautiful, diverse ecosystem, and like any other ecosystem, the more diverse it is, the healthier it is. So I had to like deprive myself of arts and culture, from watching the Green Bay Packers to watching Seinfeld to Hollywood movies. And as innocuous as that sounds, it sucks when you're isolating yourself and you can't like enjoy a football game without feeling like you're a traitor to your people. So that was exhausting. It was exhausting because I knew what I was doing was wrong. And I didn't have the courage to face that inner knowledge of my wrongness, so I'm constantly trying to suppress it. That took a lot of energy. And then it was most exhausting when people who I claimed to hate treated me with kindness. And every time that happened, it indicated in a really powerful way how wrong I was. And I want to emphasize that because I understand, I get angry and frustrated like everybody else in my own way, from my own viewpoint. When hate crimes happen, like I take it very personally. I feel like I've failed. When Christchurch happened in New Zealand, it was like a kick to the gut, and I felt like I wasn't doing enough. And I mean, just logically, like, what the hell am I supposed to do about like white supremacists halfway around the planet who committed this horrible attack? But I do take it personally, and so I want to fight, and I want to. My anger is certainly there, but I also got to remind myself that it's never a wise thing to let your enemy dictate the terms of engagement and what the enemy ideology is. And I say that's the ideology that's the enemy, not the people who are infected by it. But the enemy ideology wants the rules of engagement to be about hate, to be about aggression, to be about hostility.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
It's only one.
It's okay, no problem. I needed a good wash anyway. Been on the road. The enemy ideology wants the rules of engagement to be ones of hostility and aggression and frankly violence and lack of compassion. And if we allow those rules to set, we're basically playing by our opponent's rules, which is never really like good way to win a conflict. So that exhaustion is what brought me to a point where I was looking for an excuse to leave because I was so exhausted, and that happened when my girlfriend and I broke up and I became a single parent to our 18-month-old daughter, and then a couple months after that, a second friend of mine was shot and killed in a street fight. And by that time I had lost count how many friends had been incarcerated, so it finally hit me that if I didn't change my ways, death or prison was going to take me from my daughter. But if it wasn't for that exhaustion, I don't know that those events would have led me to a better place. They could have led me further in. It's a sad fact that like simply becoming a father or a mother, it doesn't necessarily get people to change their ways all the time. Yes, sir?
So I'm always interested in what leads people to join hate groups. So what sort of led you to that process? 'Cause I mean, it's interesting how you came out of it, but I think that there's a lot to learn with how people get into them.
Absolutely. Simple answer is unprocessed trauma. Hurt people hurt people. And it's very important to understand not all hurt people hurt people. We all suffer, we all go through trauma of one kind or another. And fortunately for humanity, most people don't let that boil over into harming other people. But if you don't have a healthy way to process your suffering, it can very easily be transferred to another person. And so an example of this is like if I'm back in the day and I'm recruiting Joe pissed off white kid into our white nationalist gang, the first thing I want to find out is what's wrong in his life. And if nothing's wrong, like I'm going to keep digging until I find something wrong. And I've never met anybody. And of course, it's very human nature to be like, oh, what's wrong in your life? And you're like, Pardeep's a therapist, he knows this. You know, like, what's wrong? What's going on? Nothing, I'm fine, everything's cool. Especially, there's a lot of gender aspect to this. For men worldwide, and this is throughout all sorts of cultures, men are not supposed to say, like, I'm afraid, I'm scared, I feel like nobody loves me, I feel like I'm not good enough. We're not supposed to air our vulnerabilities as men. That's frowned upon. So, at the same time, I can find out what's wrong by asking what they're angry about. What are you angry about? In typical Joe pissed off white kid, most of them are angry that they don't have a girlfriend, or they're angry that they don't have a job, or they're angry that they have a job and they don't make a whole lot of money. So if I can find a way to blame those things they're angry on Jews, on people of color, on gay people, on immigrants, on refugees. Now, they can blame what's wrong in their lives on other people, which is a lot easier than looking inward and saying, hey, maybe if I change some things, that would solve these problems. Because it's hard to do that. It's hard to look inward and say like, oh, I really need to like maybe take a shower once in a while and quit drinking constantly and like make something of myself so like somebody would be attracted to me. Like that takes work. Whereas it's real easy to just be like, oh, well, I don't have a girlfriend because Jews are convincing white women that LeBron James is the ideal man, and now that's why they're not attracted to white men anymore. So, as ridiculous as that sounds, like that, they're still doing that.
So real quick, Arno was also, so he was a lead singer in his band, and he was a recruiter. So trying to get like the pissed off white kids to join up the same gang that he helped us start back in that day, which is the gang that Wade Page also belonged to, the shooter in our situation.
Yeah.
Are there any times where you think back on your decision to leave and you regret it or you question it, or there's any like self-doubt in that decision?
No. No.
That was the best decision besides having his child.
There was, yeah, I think 4 big decisions in my life, and every single one of them I'm super glad with the results of every single day, are leaving the movement, having a kid, quitting drinking alcohol, and quitting smoking cigarettes. Like on a daily basis, every one of those decisions, I'm like, I made the right decision there. I make a lot of wrong decisions still. I made the wrong decision to go out to a techno club in Berlin and dance till 4 in the morning, and then when I was leaving, I tripped over a tram rail, smashed my phone, busted my head open, my knee, my thumb. Like there's a recent bad decision, but like the decision to leave the movement, and honestly, like from pretty much like right after I decided to leave, I'm like, oh, this is so much nicer. I can watch the Packers whenever I want. I can watch Seinfeld. I can go to the movies. I can like hang out with whoever I want to hang out with.
And initially, there's always difficulty to do something, right? If you're in anything, there's always that difficulty of initially doing it. But when you do it, then you're like, oh, I should have done this a long time ago.
Right? Yeah.
Right.
It was definitely one of those things. Drinking was another thing too, where I'm like, I really wish I would have made this decision much earlier.
I guess that's a question for both of you. When did you both start to see the change that you were hoping for once you guys teamed up?
Today?
Really? It took that long?
I took that long.
Did it happen finally?
It happened.
Woo!
I finally got 6 kids to understand. When you can convince your own people, right? I think that took a long time for us to, because I think initially there was a lot of people in the Gurdwara that were like, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Why are more white people coming inside the Gurdwara? Why are you inviting them inside the Gurdwara? And, right? They were scared. They were like, and I was like, okay, you can be scared, but we can't sit in this. We can't. I mean, I think there's something very, and I think this is with different faiths. The more that I learn about different faiths, the more that you understand that there's a lot of commonalities. But even in Sikhi, you're like, okay, it happened in the Gurdwara, a place of learning. We have something to teach the world. How are we going to teach them if we're so scared of everyone? And so we have a responsibility here. We started to see it with I think we started to see it with kids before we saw it with adults.
Yeah.
Because I think kids are sometimes attuned to like, and there was like this. We went to did our first talk, and we were much like we were at the school, it's high school, and they're like, okay, just tell your stories. We'll tell our stories. And soon, like right after that talk, Arno's got a line full of like 20 kids. I got a line on the other side full of 20 kids. Almost all the kids are coming up to us and being like, and they're talking about their own stuff. I've been suicidal. I tried to commit suicide. I don't want to live anymore. This happened, that happened. And you're just like, holy shit. There's a lot of kids that are hurting and not able to say what they're hurting about. And they're just like 2 people that just came out and spilled their guts. That vulnerability allowed for their vulnerability to come out. And this might have been like, I haven't told anybody this. I was sexually assaulted. I was like, man, Arno, I don't know what we've gotten ourselves into. But that was part of the healing process, although we were taking it, right? Because then you leave at the end of the night, you're like, okay, I don't want to see kids hurting already. And you just realize that there's so much personal pain that they're going through. And so, yeah, like, man, today, I mean, this is a continuation of that.
And then I guess building off of that, you get really like heavy days where you're hearing all of these stories. How do you come back from that? Because I feel like I have to work on being a better listener, but the times that I've done that part well, I feel really weighed down by the narrative they're trying to tell
You
me.
need time by yourself. You need time by yourself to recharge, and all of you do, because you're going into very heavy careers. And every once in a while, you have to go back and read a book. And you'll need some time to just write or do nothing, right? And then you also need to understand that we all don't just regulate, we co-regulate. And so we work on that together. And Arno has been, there was a Sunday that I called him and I said, dude, you've not only been my like brother, but you've been my therapist. Thank you. And then that's always the case, is that we would navigate the world, and Arno just said a whole bunch of things that I think I said upstairs. We weren't together. Right? And you're like, man, how are they repeating the same thing? I mean, did they talk to one another? No, it's just, that's that's how the world works.
Your name is Simran?
Simran.
Simran?
That's Simran on a stone. I like to tell people.
Ah, okay.
So they say it
Simran.
right.
Make sure you get your Simran time.
Yeah.
And everybody, like, take your name and put time after it, and make sure you have that for yourself. For me, it's Arno time. And I'm very strict about my Arno time. I get as much of it as I need to keep going. And a great word that I just love is master dating. Master dating is taking yourself out on a date. And I travel all the time, so I was like, I take myself out on a date all the time. And honestly, in all seriousness, doing this work, it has to come from a place of inner peace. If it doesn't, you can very easily like make things worse. So to be the best you can be about social justice, about anything that you're putting out into the world, you have to be coming from a place, and it doesn't mean you have to be all zen all the time. You can't get angry. Of course, we're all human. So be gentle with yourself, but really take that time for you to have some space and to get to know yourself, and just to be like, hey, I'm pretty damn hilarious. I'm having fun. Like, this is cool. Because when the more often you do that, the better you're going to be at whatever it is that you're trying to do.
We're gonna go with the kids.
This is more for you, but
Sure.
Can you speak to how being involved made you feel, especially in terms of empowerment, versus how you feel now and how empowered you feel?
That's a great question. I think,
Especially like at the height of your empowerment.
Yeah.
yeah, I'd say like the depth of my involvement. The lowest part of it. The height was at the depth, but that's a really good question. And I think the answer has to do with like what's genuine empowerment and what's like a false empowerment. Going back to addiction, you get all drunk and for a period of time, you're like, whoa, you're feeling great, you're king of the world, you're having the best time ever, you're so smart, you're so sexy, you're so funny, everything's amazing. And then like, if you don't do something really stupid and like really dig yourself in a hole, your worst case scenario is you have a ripping hangover the next day. And then you ask yourself, well, was I really that smart and funny and sexy? And was I really that awesome, or was it the alcohol? My time in the movement, as we called it, was definitely, it was that kind of false high. But it was definitely a high. Like there's still, to this day, like one of the things I miss, and when I was at the Techno Club in Berlin too, I'm getting a whiff of that. So I wasn't playing, But there was like these two, they were like older than me, these guys in their 50s from Italy were doing a live techno PA, and it was amazing. I was like right in front of them, just rocking out, and I looked back at the crowd, and there's this huge crowd of people there. I was like, rah! They're just like going nuts for these guys playing this music, and that was like a very genuine thing. When I was in that band, and we're doing this super violent, hateful music, and our claim to fame was every time we played, somebody left in an ambulance. And it wasn't like somebody that our crowd attacked from the outside. It was our crowd like beating each other to the point where somebody gets hospitalized. And when you're up on stage and you're like, raw, you're like putting this energy out, and you can see how it affects a crowd of people. Like, that's a rush. And beyond the music, just like
Jay-Z had a song. Have you ever seen the crowd going?
Yes, Jay-Z, I have.
Was it Jay-Z and Beyonce?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I-
Yes, we have.
Yeah. And again, it's there's a spectrum of that. I think when this techno live PA is happening, it's just like the beats. It's just like dancing and music and motion. Whereas in my case, it was not just the super fast, aggressive music. It was the lyrics, like these really violent, hateful lyrics that was driving people literally berserk. So it could go in a good way, it could go in a bad way. But I would say my sense of empowerment back in those days was entirely false. It was like, I didn't feel good about it when it wasn't immediately happening. Whereas today, if I'm sitting here talking with you guys, I feel great if I'm doing a talk in front of a big audience or whatever, like, and just telling stories and connecting with people. Like, that's a genuine sense of empowerment that you leave feeling good about, especially as Pardeep mentioned, when afterwards, like, there's a queue of participants coming up saying, well, this really meant a lot to me because of this. If somebody can see themselves in my story and connect with me, and then I can see myself in them, I think that's like a very simple objective of what we're trying to achieve, is just getting human beings to see themselves in others and to see others in themselves. If we can do that's like a prerequisite to accomplishing everything else we want to accomplish.
Within a certain spheres of whatever we do, the work that we do, so we do see some people who even see it in social justice, right? And they're like, I got this many followers, I got this many likes, I got this, and it's not genuinely for a betterment of society. It's for their own identity. And even that sometimes is false, because we'll do a crowd move, we'll have a crowd say, okay, there's 4,000 people, cool. We're doing the same talk as we're talking with one person. We don't get up, down. If somebody praises, it's no big deal, because it's like you're just at peace. And when you're at peace, it's not gonna. It's like if you get one person to come to a show or a thing, that's just as cool as 4,000. And there's certain people, Masood is another person that he will take time out and say, I just want to talk to this one person. And so we all have to understand, what do we all do that kind of helps our identity get to that place that might be false as well. Not to say that any of that is false, but you see it, you're like, okay, this person isn't really in it for the right reasons. They're
Well, before I was a skinhead, I was a punk rocker, and I was like just as wild and violent, just not racist. I just hated everybody. And my punk rock friends had a big party, and some preppy girls came to this party, and somebody did something to piss them off, and they went stomping out, and they're like, our boyfriend's on the football team, and they're gonna kick all your asses. And I was like, really? Why don't you give me a ride to where your boyfriends are? And I'm like chasing them to the car, and I tried jumping in the car with them, and they shut the door and lock it. And then I jump on the back of the car, and then my buddy jumps in the back of the car, and they go whipping out of the driveway. My buddy was flying off. I'm holding on. They go whipping down the block, and then go around the corner, and I go flying off, probably going about 25 miles an hour. Fortunately, I had my punk rock leather jacket on, which did what it was supposed to, and took a lot of the road rash. But all the flesh was tore off my hands and the whole side of my face. And I went back to the party and started slamming whiskey, and I'm like, let's go find the football players. And I'm like limping around looking for them. I'm looking like something from Night of the Living Dead. And that was the last thing I remembered. And then the next day I wake up and I'm in the back of my buddy's Subaru in a cornfield and it's March and I'm like, and I'm like super hungover, I'm in all kinds of pain. And I go home and I come in the door and my parents are like, oh my God, what happened to you? And I'm like, I fell off a skateboard. And they're like, well, you don't skateboard. And I'm like, not anymore, I don't. Oh my God, they took me to the emergency room and this like old battle axe of a nurse sits down in front of me and she's got a big tub full of iodine and a Brillo pad. And she starts scrubbing the scabs off of my face and my hands, which now it's about almost 24 hours since the accident happened. But it's all full of dirt and rocks and like, I'm like, put me out! She's like, oh, stop being such a baby. And I'm just like, ah! And it was one of the gnarliest physical pains I ever went through, but it had to be done. If it wouldn't have been done, I honestly could have died of all sorts of infection and sepsis and what have you. When I wrote my first book, it was like the emotional version of that. I was tearing up all these old scabs that were like festering for decades that were never properly cleaned so that they could heal, and it sucked. It was gnarly. But if I hadn't have done that, I started doing this, like sharing my story as a means of self-preservation. Because my past was like literally consuming me, because I hadn't reconciled it. I hadn't looked at it with openness and with honesty. And I think that's something that we all need to do personally, but it's also something we need to do as a society. And when we do that as a society, it's probably the most difficult thing, but the best way to get that to happen as a society is for us to take those personal steps first.
Well, kind of going off what you were just saying, we've talked a lot about forgiveness of other people, but how do you deal with forgiveness of yourself and with holding that dichotomy of, you know, I've done things that I'm not proud of and they've inspired other people to do things they're not proud of, like knowing that you've hurt people and also knowing fundamentally that you have changed? How do you kind of hold that discomfort?
That's an awesome question. Pardeep and I are both part of an amazing organization called the Forgiveness Project. You can find it at theforgivenessproject.com. It's literally like hundreds of stories of forgiveness in every kind of scenario you can imagine. I was, one of the reasons I was in Berlin was because two of our Forgiveness Project peers were there, Bassam Araman and Rami Alaman. And Bassam is a Palestinian man whose daughter was murdered by an Israeli soldier, and Rami is an Israeli man whose daughter was murdered by a Palestinian militant. So to hear these guys talk about forgiveness, like you said, I mean, that's, to me, it's just, it's intimidating almost. It's massively inspiring. It's the type of thing where, like, if these two guys, and they're like this. I mean, they're homies. I got to go and eat with them, and Bassam's wife was there also. If you see people on the two sides of like one of the longest, most brutal conflicts in humanity, who both lost their daughters to it, can like come together and find forgiveness between each other and set the tone for peace, you're kind of like obligated to be like, yeah, I have to step up my game as well. But for self-forgiveness, I think it's, I can't say it's harder because I have never, no one's done anything to me where I've had to be anywhere near on the level of forgiveness that Pardeep's been through. Like, no one's murdered a loved one of mine. I've had friends who were killed in street fights, but it hurts me, and I miss them still, but like, they were out there doing dumb shit, and that's what got them killed. It wasn't like, it wasn't like a bad thing happening to good people kind of thing. For self-forgiveness, for me, it's an ongoing process. It's never, I don't think there's ever gonna be a day where I wake up and I'm like, oh, today's the day. I forgive myself. Glad that's over with. Like, I always have, and I think this goes back to one of the reasons I got involved in white nationalism is that there was, going way back, even before that, when I was a little kid, everybody would always gush about how wonderful and amazing and gifted and genius I was. And then my mom was miserable all the time because my dad's drinking. And I think even going way back to then, I would be like, I'm not wonderful. And if you don't believe me, watch what I'm gonna do to this kid. Watch what I'm gonna do to this school. And it's that little kid inside me saying, I'm not wonderful. Damn it. If you don't, I'm not wonderful. If you don't believe me, I'm gonna prove it. That's what led me into white nationalism. And now I'm at the point where I just kind of, I've acquiesced that kid is always a part of me. And it still is. Like, shit doesn't work out for me sometimes now, and great or small or whatever. And when that happens, that kid comes back and says, you don't deserve to have stuff work out for you. You don't deserve to be happy. You don't deserve to be successful. You don't deserve to be loved. You deserve to suffer. That's all you deserve for the rest of your life. And if that's what you get, you'll be getting off easy. And there was a time when that voice would consume me. Before I started writing, I was in this like suicidal depression for almost a year. But now, when that voice comes up, I'm just kind of like, okay, dude, I hear you. Yeah, I get it. I know. All right. I gotta get back to work now. Okay. A lot of it is, it's a tactical thing. It's like, I'm not gonna be really good at helping a guy who just got out of the Ku Klux Klan begin his journey to become a better person and a better dad and a better citizen if I'm not actively doing the best I can on mine. So it's basically like I have no business telling anybody about self-forgiveness. And that's, I think everybody
That's
can
something,
benefit, from self-forgiveness.
Yeah, we all have something where we go through something and say, okay, we could have done better at that. We talk a lot about my daughter, and the other day I had a discussion with her. She had a dream that, mom and dad were having trouble, and mom did something to dad and cheated on dad and this thing, that thing.
Whoa.
And just, I don't know why. So me and her were alone, and I said, and when somebody is not forgiving themselves, you almost want to ask them what they're scared of. And oftentimes they're scared of, because when you do forgive yourself, there's a sense of responsibility that comes out of the other end of that one. There's not a sense of responsibility when you can't forgive yourself, because then it's all about you anyways. And you're busy holding on to that, right? Rather than saying, how can I be of service now? So, back in the day when me and my wife initially were dating, there was things that I did. And she forgave me. And I had to say to my daughter, I said, listen, I know you had that dream about your mom, but the truth is that back in the day, this is what the situation really was. And I knew that she looked at me differently. But then she starts to tell me a little bit about what's going on in her life. I say, Deb, quite honestly, this is what's happening at school and this thing and that thing. And so, but I knew that there would be, if I didn't, if my wife didn't forgive me, and I didn't forgive myself, that I wouldn't have to live up to that responsibility. I could just keep engaging in that irresponsible behavior. And so, when we talk about courage, it's courage that's really allowing you to forgive yourself and really embracing that genuinely. Because we can say that we forgive ourselves, but one of the first discussions that we had was, there's another road that me and you have to travel on this one our own. And we need you to really genuinely forgive yourself, because we can't do this if you're sitting in a place where you're pretending that you do forgive yourself.
It's interesting that, I've learned so much about self-forgiveness from Pardeep, but just thinking of his brand of forgiveness as vengeance. So to me, like, self-forgiveness is my vengeance on my old self. To me, it's like, and this may sound very counterintuitive, but if I'm beating the shit out of myself for all the horrible things I did, I'm not honoring all the people that I hurt, because I'm not going to be able to help stop other people from committing that kind of violence. So to really honor the people that I hurt, which is why, at least is my logical reason for not forgiving myself, I want to stop other people from committing those kind of hate crimes. I want to stop other people from making the mistakes and getting involved in that kind of stuff in the first place.
You guys are young, and we don't know what 5 years from now holds. Some of you guys are PhD, Sometimes I mean, you guys can be doctors, politicians, teachers, whatever you go into, that continues coming back to that and saying, okay, can I forgive myself for something that I just messed up on? Can I really do that, or am I dwelling on that? Because sometimes the mind does that, especially when we have sort of an anxious mind. But we will have anxiety around something that we did wrong, and we'll forget the 99 things that we did right. And so come back to that sense of, okay, I'm okay to mess up. I don't have to say every single word the right way to be able to deliver this message. Whatever that is, you have to come back to that sense of, I'm allowed to mess up. I'm allowed to make a mistake and realize I'm not a mistake.
Thank you guys.
Thank you guys.
Yeah.